Duelist Nexus releases on July 28th, with all new support that flips the meta on its head, all new cards that change what legacy support can be, and an all new type to top it all off. This set changes everything. Forget everything you think you know about the game. Here's... But first, we have to talk about SANS, which stands for Steven After Not Subscribing. Steven was a normal and happy kid who loved the Curry Bandits. Girls, let's go play Utopia! But one day, Steven missed an upload because he didn't hit the subscribe button and ring the bell, so he lost to PURRELY at locals. What do you mean it's unaffected? Then Steven fucking died or something because he never learned how to out-X PURRELY Noir. Don't be like Steven. Subscribe to the Curry Bandits. MANNADIUM Torrid is a level 2 tuner that summons itself like the other two, but when it's popped, summons any MANNADIUM tuner from a deck. Veda Calanta summons itself if a card is destroyed and you control Vsauce, and searches Clear New World, this random card from Battle of Chaos that was so unremarkable, most people didn't realize it was in Vsauce's arm. Vsauce Amritra is a synchro tuner that only requires light monsters rather than non-tuners, treats itself as Starfrost, searches a spell trap that mentions Vsauce on summon, and can pop a monster you control to give all synchro monsters 800 attack. All these back rows suck, and talking about them upsets me. Also, I'm way behind on this script, so we're skipping them, okay? These are pretty cool pieces of support for the somewhat rough around the edges MANNADIUM Vsauce pile. Torrid correctly recognizes that Meek is better than Fearless, and therefore the best way to make a third tuner is for it to be more copies of Meek. Now your float chains can go through 4 names instead of 3, and Amritra is an incredible payoff that's able to flex several different pieces of Vsauce good stuff. To start, there's of course Calarium to grab another tuner that can be popped with Amritra's third effect, triggering its own effect to float, and Calarium's effect to reborn it. Reichphobia and Perloreno can pivot you towards a potential Scareclaw or Tearlaments engine. Trivikarma is an imperm with the ability to search again once it hits the graveyard. Reframing is an Omni-Negate counter trap that'll remain live even if Amritra leaves the field, as long as you end on some synchro of some sort. And if you want an interruption that'll really make your opponent go, no way that works. All the Tearlaments back row is live if you control Vsauce, so if you want a counter trap that shuffles instead of destroying, an imperm every single turn, or a Book of Moon that mills because the stupid deck's worst trap card is better than the best card in half the decks in the fucking game. I'm sorry you had to see that. Its material line makes it accessible just by having Starfrost pop any tuner, or having Riemhart pop Meek. Meanwhile, its status as a tuner makes it a viable Bish Balkan target, so fuck you, Coder. We're beefing with Coder now. Josh didn't want to beef, so we're starting beef with the Coder instead. Revolution Synchron is a level 3 tuner that can be used as material from the hand for the synchro summon of a power tool or level 7 or 8 dragon synchro. And if you control level 7 or higher synchro, can mill a card to reborn itself as a level 1.
He copied my whole fucking flow! Word for word, bar for bar!
Wheel Synchron can be treated as a non-tuner, gives you an extra normal, and can manage itself from graveyard to reduce a synchro's level by up to 4. Cosmic Quasar Dragon can negate a whole bunch of cards very slowly, and can quickly tag out into one of the much better cards you could have summoned instead of it. This might be the most phoned in cover card I've ever read. You should have just put Crimson Dragon on the cover at that point. Crimson Dragon searches a spell or trap that mentions Crimson Dragon on summon, and can target a level 7 or higher synchro, bounce itself back to the extra deck, and summon a dragon synchro monster with the same level as the target. Synchro World is a field spell that gets 2 signal counters whenever a monster is synchro summoned, and can remove 4 to level modulate, 7 to reborn a tuner, or 10 to reborn a synchro. And it mentions Crimson Dragon because they forgot to give it an effect that actually has to do with Crimson Dragon, but still wanted it to be searchable. Other search targets include this janky not soul charge and this whack back to the front that triggers Zulkin. Did I mention I'm behind on the script? These cards have some very cool ramifications on both the Synchron Speeder Turbo deck and on synchro decks at large. For starters, Wheel Synchron is both the first good level 5 to summon with Speeder, not only for its lack of quick draw's rather extreme restriction, but also for its neat extension and modulation effects, and the first non-tuner you can summon with Speeder, a groundbreaking piece of support that solves the deck's issue of getting choked out of non-tuners by filling their board with Synchrons. Being a level 5 does come with the disadvantage of not being able to find much use outside of dedicated Synchron strategies. The same, however, can't be said of Revolution Synchron, a generically useful tool for turning any level 4 on the board into Ancient Fairy Dragon and then into an 8 like Savage or Amritra. This engine saw play in... Oh, come the fuck on! The desiccated corpse of Tearlament used Revolution Synchron to turn a level 4 normal summon like Rhino Heart or Mudora into Ancient Fairy Dragon, optionally use it to swap Pearl Arena for Raitsoth and vice versa, and summon a monster from hand, then bring back Rev as a 1 to make Chaos Ruler and get their mills started. While we don't have Chaos Ruler in the Land of the Free, we do have Amritra, which can search the entire Grand Imperial fleet of Tearlament's back row for whatever that's worth. Rev also popped up in decks like MANNADIUM and Super Heavy, which notably has the option to search him with Gear Gigan X. Jumping straight from one can of worms to another, Crimson Dragon has a stupid amount of possibilities. Being a generic level 12 fills a niche that was practically vacant before. Gone are the days where decks like VW are so down bad for something to do with 12 stars that they're stuck making Final Sigma. And it goes without saying, cheating out Dragon Synchros couldn't possibly go wrong. Just to name a few lines, you can target Baron you control to tag Crimson Dragon into Dissipator, which can further extend your combo in addition to being another negate. Ash Dragon or Amritra can be an 8 target so you can summon Crystal Wing. Shen Shen gives you access to Hot Red. And folks, what do you think happens when you cross a level 8 tuner Amritra and a level 8 non-tuner Astrolaud, then target it with Crimson Dragon in the draw phase?
At least not much is broken.
Yes, there is a lot of investment involved in summoning a level 12 Synchro alongside another high-level Synchro monster, but as level ramping runs rampant in the modern Synchro summoning sphere, 22 stars of material starts to seem like a walk in the park. Last thing I'll talk about is how Synchro World gaining signal counters means it's finally feasible to activate On Your Mark Get Set Duel's draw effect, which formerly would usually take until like turn 5, a turn that most Synchron players probably can't even imagine, let alone successfully play out. Gazelle, the king of mythical claws, searches either a level 5 Fiend or Chimera fusion on summon, and when it's sent to the graveyard as fusion material, searches any illusion type monster. Yes, you heard that right, there's a new type, and yeah, that's pretty much it. It's a reference to some old underdeveloped rules from Duelist Kingdom and some cards from some of the video games, and so far they all have this effect that says if they battle, neither monster gets destroyed, and that's as close as you're going to get to an interesting thing to say about them. Big Winged Baphomet searches both a level 4 beast and Chimera fusion on summon, but locks you to fusions and reborns an illusion monster when it's fused off. Cornfield Quaddle is an illusion monster that can discard itself to search a monster that mentions Chimera fusion, and banishes itself to negate an effect that targets a card you control while you control Chimera the flying mythical beast. Mirror Sword Knight is an illusion that tributes itself to summon a monster that mentions Chimera fusion from deck, and if you control Chimera, can negate an opponent's monster effect on the field by banishing itself. Chimera fusion is a quick play fusion spell that summons a fusion monster using at least one beast or fiend monster and can add itself back to hand if you control Chimera. Chimera the king of phantom beasts is a fusion of a beast and a fiend that treats itself as Chimera, rips a card from your opponent's hand during the end phase of the turn it's summoned, and can banish itself from graveyard as a quick effect to reborn a beast, fiend, or illusion monster. And finally, Chimera the Illusion Beast is a fusion of Chimera and any number of illusions that can attack multiple times and zeroes out the attack of anything it battles. These cards have a lot of hidden potential despite stemming from some of the least playable DM nostalgia archetypes that I genuinely refuse to believe anyone is actually nostalgic for, like who is soy facing over the Baphomet retrain? Be real with me right now. Mirror Sword Knight and Quaddle Searching It are both 1-card starters, allowing you to summon Baphomet from deck, search the other 2 pieces needed to summon Chimera, and both search and reborn an illusion to fuse Chimera with into Illusion Chimera, ending your turn with a hand rip, a monster negate, and 1 target protection for a monster that can't be destroyed by battle, with follow-up in the form of a Search Mirror Knight, and Chimera's Reborn effect summoning Baphomet to do it all again next turn. This all forms the backbone of a fairly competent combo engine that maybe isn't your strongest choice, but has some interesting applications that might make it worth a second look. Gazelle and Baphomet each search a decent handful of cards given the generic nature of their search window. Gazelle only has a couple even worth mentioning, like Silva and goddamn Garbage Lord. It's an extender, but Baphomet can search things like Wong Hu, a decent side deck options against things like Purrely, and Spring Ant's Kit, which ties together the potential branded Chimera deck that got a couple tops in the OCG. Using branded fusion is a way to make Rinbrum and send Gazelle, which would then search Mirror Sword Knight and start both your branded plays and your Chimera plays. A couple more things to keep in mind: Chimera fusion being a quick play makes it a great way to summon the unrelated but still part of the family Guardian Chimera. Phantom Beast King being able to quick effect reborn Labyrinth monsters makes it a very good punishment target, and Gazelle being able to search any illusion monster is troubling, I suppose you would say. Right now, with almost every illusion monster being part of this archetype, it's a fairly harmless effect, but if they continue to print more illusion monsters with potentially better effects, having a card that searches any of them right off the bat feels like a strange design decision. At Purely Noir is a rank 2 that can discard a card to bounce a card your opponent controls, or 2 if it has Sleepy Memory attached, and can up to thrice per turn chain to the activation of a Purely Quick Play to attach that card and set 1 Purely trap from deck. Purely Sharely summons a Purely from deck, then ranks it up into a Purely Xyz monster with the same rank as a Purely Xyz you control, and attaches it with a Purely Quick Play from deck with the same name as one attached to that Xyz monster you control. Hi, I'm Dave Konami, and I need money to finance my new yacht. So I'm going to sell you 1 kick of this football, and I promise not to pull it away right before you kick it and laugh at you when you slip and fall after missing the ball. $5 a kick. These cards solve the problems the deck had both before the ban list and the ones that cropped up after they mildly tipped the balance on the deck's consistency and nearly drowned the dog in the river. Having a corresponding Xyz monster for Sleepy Memory makes it far easier to get access to its non-once per turn draw effect, and the fact that it searches PURRELY greatly boosts your ability to do the draw 6 combo. This also makes Sleepy a sort of 1.5 card combo for at least 2 draws and 2 spins with X PURRELY Noir, with the potential to get more draws if you get a second copy of Sleepy off of My Friend. Building off that basic framework, the deck can easily get 4 draws off of hands with 2 or 3 PURRELY quick plays. Meanwhile, Shirley is a pretty good searchable option to expand your board beyond just the one monster, giving you the option to use Beauty's Monster Negate if you have Pretty in rotation, or even just an extra draw with Sleepy. Since Delicious was put to 1, the deck hasn't had a very consistent line to even get to Noir, so that alone gets the deck at the very least back to where it was before, and with how much success the deck has somehow still managed to see in spite of the hits and how strong the deck became in the OCG with the new support, it stands to reason that PURRELY will be making a comeback very soon. Rescue Ace Preventer can summon itself by banishing 1 Rescue Ace card from your graveyard, can quick effect Book of Moon an opponent's monster if you control another Rescue Ace, and summons a banished Rescue Ace when it's sent to the graveyard. Emergency! Is a quick play spell that E-Telly— wait a minute, they named the deck's E-Telly Emergency? Fuck you. That E-Telly's a Rescue Ace, then tributes a Rescue Ace from hand or field. Also, you can banish it from graveyard to set a Rescue Ace trap from graveyard. I could cry. This really changes everything for the deck. I mean, for starters, Preventer having a quick effect makes their hand trap that summons from deck so much more playable. It doesn't do anything on its own, but if you have Engine or Attacker in hand, you can set up a quick Book of Moon as early as turn 0. In addition, the ability to return a Hydrant to the field after having to banish it to summon Turbulence by simply linking off Preventer makes it so much easier to keep your back row's additional effects online. And honestly, just having Recursion for banished cards makes it so much easier to manage your resources without running out of steam. Meanwhile, Emergency is an E-Telly, the easiest slam dunk of card design in the game's history. As long as you have another name in hand or field, it gives you easier access to Hydrant, Preventer, and Turbulence, and being quick play as well as settable with Turbulence means that after you've used your traps, you can trade a Hydrant that you no longer need on the field for a Preventer that you can use as an extra interrupt. Being a spell, it's searchable with Airlifter, one of the deck's best normal summons, and one time I chained it to Forbidden Chalice to get Hydrant off the field so its effect would resolve, and I felt like the smartest player in the history of the game. In the OCG, these cards made Rescue Ace the top deck on paper. Okay, so here's the thing. PURRELY has been the deck to beat in the OCG recently, and if there's one thing Rescue Ace does, it's beat PURRELY because of the interaction between Impulse and Noir. Noir is unaffected, but Impulse's effect to negate affects the player, meaning that if you summon Impulse, your opponent is forced to use Noir to spin Impulse, who can then chain its effect to tribute itself and summon a Turbulence or Preventer from deck. If they then use Noir again to try and spin the card you summon, chaining Emergency could trade that target for yet another Rescue Ace from deck. Getting 2 materials off of Noir usually removes its protection anyway, and forcing your opponent to waste 1 or 2 of their 3 spins takes the pressure off of some of your more important monsters. As always, take the Earth Insect Locals pie chart with a grain of salt, but be prepared to be taking this former meme archetype seriously in the new format.
This that great poop on that AV on that
Altergeist.
Altergeist Malwisp is a level 3 tuner that summons itself when it's added to the hand, and on summon, reborns an Altergeist. Paratrader mills an Altergeist card when it's sent from the field to the graveyard. Revitalization is a trap that reborns an Altergeist link and can banish itself from the graveyard to extra normal an Altergeist, and Adminia is a link 4 that sets an Altergeist trap from deck on summon, and has a quick effect to send a card you control to the graveyard to steal an opponent's monster and treat it as an Altergeist. Much like the Trap Trick support from the Structure deck, these cards give Altergeist the tools to function more as a monster-heavy mid-range deck with multiple 2 to 3 card combos to end on a good mixture of monsters like Adminia and traps like Protocol. Malwisp represents 2 bodies on field off a single activation of Meluseek, as well as a tuner that gives you access to things like Herald of the Arclight and Arcanite Magician. Paratrader can mill Revitalization, which lets you take advantage of the non-once per turn effect of Marionetta in hands that need to go through Haunted Rock or that need to use Meluseek as a normal summon. This level of extension gives the deck the ability to make actual good use of its existing combo pieces like Pukari and Prime Banshee, and end on boards of diverse front row, back row, and hand interactions like Protocol's Monster Negate, Hextia's Spell Trap Negate, Adminia's Steal, and Multi-Faker from hand summoning Silcatus. While the support is of course appreciated, it does feel a bit melancholic seeing so many trap decks being pivoted towards more monster-focused game plans that end up cutting most of the trap cards aside from in-engine ones. Back in my day, some decks just played trap cards because that's what you do when your main engine doesn't do big turn 1 combos. Now if you end on a small board without Apo Baron Archetype Boss, they call you a mid-range deck and stuff you full of hand traps. It'll happen to you! Hey, does anyone else remember how in 2020 we all lost our minds a little bit? Well, in 2020 I wrote like 4 or 5 essays for my medieval history class about the Song of Roland, and I had a rough draft of the first act of a screenplay adaptation of it for my screenwriting class, and I'm positive I tried to bring it up at least at some point in my Asian American literature class. I'd like to get ahead of the theater kid allegations. I'm actually worse. I was a film student. Anyway, the reason I did this was because the INFERNOBLE Nights had come out that past summer, and quarantine smoothed over my brain so much that I didn't really have anything else to talk about. I also found this modern rendition of the song.
The fairest flower of chivalry to bloom in all the land.
This is a weird episode.
Infernoble Knight Richardetto is a level 1 tuner that reborns a fire warrior on summon but locks you into warriors. It can banish itself from hand or graveyard to special summon a fire warrior from hand as a tuner. Turpin summons itself from hand or graveyard if you control a monster with an equip card, and can equip itself from the graveyard to a warrior, letting it be treated as a tuner. Infernoble Arms Almace can pop itself to equip a different Infernoble Arms from deck, and if the equipped monster is sent to the graveyard, you can add back a fire warrior from graveyard or banished. Noble Arms Museum can pay 1200 to search a Noble Arms card, and during the turn that you use that effect, you can special summon a Noble Knight out of your back row, but locks you into warriors unless you control Emperor Charles. Angelica, Princess of Noble Arms, searches Horn of Oliphant or a card that mentions Emperor Charles on summon, and if she's targeted by an attack or card effect, you can mill a fire warrior, banish her until the end phase, and summon a Roland from deck or extra deck. Finally, Emperor Charles the Great is a Link 1 that specifically needs a level 9 monster equipped with an equip card that is named Infernoble Knight Emperor Charles. If you find a way to cheat this card out, you earned it. On summon, it equips Charles from graveyard and gains its name and effects, and it can send an equip spell from hand or graveyard to negate a spell or trap. These cards address a lot of Infernoble's issues, including a balance patch that unconditionally buffs their boss monster, turning the already strong Emperor Charles into a non-once per turn spell trap negate in addition to its existing pop effect. Extremely cool to see this type of free upgrade onto an existing boss rather than giving the deck a new monster they have to pivot towards. Richardetto puts more bodies on board and gives you better access to a tuner. Its existence gives Infernoble access to a level 1 tuner that naturally has both those qualities instead of having to gain them somehow, and access to an Assault target that reborns one of the Assault materials. Its effect from the graveyard gives you additional extension to help get extra warriors out of hand, and Turpin's effect gives you a better way to extend off of Ogier's mill effect. Meanwhile, Museum and Almace are 3 more copies of Durandal, completing the dream of queuing up to an event with 40 Durandal in deck. But also Museum can be used to pull Charles out of the back row after being equipped to Charles the Great, so you can link him off for a second Charles the Great and a second spell negate. Even before that, it can be used to summon functionally any Infernoble from graveyard when comboed with their ability to equip themselves from graveyard. The warrior lock isn't ideal, but between Charles the Great and Baron, there's enough warrior and bosses to build a decent board out of. Unchained Souls of Shyama can pop a card you control and a spell or trap on field, and can reborn itself by popping a fiend monster or set card you control. Sharvara can quick effect pop a fiend or set card you control to summon itself from hand and lock you to fiends while it's on the field, and if it's sent to the graveyard, sets an Unchained spell or trap directly from deck. Unchained Soul Lord of Yama is a Link 2 that takes 2 fiends, adds an Unchained from deck or graveyard on summon, and if a card you control is destroyed, banishes itself from graveyard to summon a fiend from hand or graveyard and pop a card you control. These cards greatly expand Unchained's options and the consistency of some of their high-end plays. Sharvara is a fantastic enabler, combining some of the best aspects of both Aruha and Rakea, as well as giving you much more consistent access to Unchained's great trap lineup. Shyama is a strong extender, being an Unchained to summon from deck with one of your float effects that can later be brought back for an additional body. Being level 6 Fiends gives you the ability to make DDD Wave High King Caesar as a consistent part of your end board. If you're a Master Duel Zoomer, that's double Rukalos. But on that note, you also have the option to trade him out for Machinex, a double monster suck. Yama opens up an immense amount of potential lines for the deck, being generic to Fiends and therefore summonable with things like Torguide and Evil Twins, with Torguide and a Rhino Warrior being a potential 1-card combo to set up Rage and Escape. Speaking of Rage, Yama being a soul that can be made generically with 2 Fiends has made it usable in other Fiend decks like Labyrinth as a way to summon Unchained Soul of Rage, a strong interruption that can remove up to 2 cards in the field by linking it with an opponent's monster into Nightmare Unicorn. Very cool support that I'm excited to see Unchained players tinker with. Wait, fuck, we're supposed to be beefing with Coder. Unchained support sucks! Evil Tile Fullest can summon an Evil Tile from hand or graveyard face down on summon, can set Evo Force or Evo Instant from deck, and can protect a monster from being destroyed by tributing a reptile or dinosaur monster. Evil Sword Leos sets Evolutionary Bridge or Evo Singularity on summon, and if he was summoned by a fire monster's effect, can mill a fire reptile or dinosaur and make 2 monsters on the field the same type and level as that monster. Evil Zarlars is a generic rank 6 that can't be targeted by monster effects, and when your opponent activates a card or effect, can detach 2 materials to negate a face-up card on the field, or only 1 material if all its materials are reptile or dinosaurs. Rest in peace, Solda. Nobody gave you the respect you deserved. Now there's a stronger rank 6 for dinos to go into to complement the level 6 dino support we recently got in Wild Survivors, and of course it's not restricted to dinos. Quite a few decks with the capacity to make a rank 6 are glad to be unsleeving their copies of Photon Strike Bouncer for something with a little more coverage. Kinda unfortunate that it has the Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss effect, but with a timing on it that makes it unable to stop Dark Ruler unless your opponent plays into it. Nonetheless, it makes dinosaur decks more resilient into back row, giving them 2 Omni Negates to deal with things like Evenly or Dark Hole. The main deck cards try their best. Fullest Searching Evo Force is among the most consistent enablers for the Evil Tile gimmick yet, and if you draw a Najasho to summon with Fullest's first effect, you can use that to summon 2 Evil Swords from deck. But other than that, there's some anti-synergy, given that unfortunate, Leos doesn't get his second effect if he's summoned with Evo Force, because even though he's treated as summoned with an Evil tile, he needs to be summoned specifically by a fire monster, a quality Force doesn't bestow. If you do make that effect live, it does help tie the archetype together with dinosaurs as a whole better, letting you mill Misk and turn Evil tile you control into a level 4 dino to make Dulgar Lagia with, and the first effect searches Evo Singularity, a sort of Revolt Superfactorial-like card that puts a free Volzar on field if you're brave enough to play Evols in your main deck. Kinda sad the way they made this support so close to playable, but just clearly lacking in several areas. Ultimate Bright Knight of Ursatron Alpha is an Ursarctic and Drytron card that can't be normal summoned or set, can special itself if you control an Ursarctic or Drytron monster, and search an Ursarctic or Drytron spell or trap. Ursarctic Polar Star, do I have to go over the Ursarctic summoning condition? It's just subtraction. Contribute itself in a level 8 Ursarctic from hand or field to summon a level 7 Ursarctic Synchro that gains the effect to stop monsters summoned from the extra deck that have a level from activating their effects. Deck equal bad. Solution drain. I am obligated to tell you that this card combos with Septentreon to form a complete extra deck skill drain, even though I really don't want to. Just, why do they do this? Who at Konami is getting their fucking rocks off to every bad deck having a skill drain as their Saki one-trick win con? I refuse to get stun-locked on this stupid card because there's actually some interesting things to point out about Ursatron since it's a really free extender for both decks that also gets Drytron to Nova and Ursarctic to Radiation more efficiently. I wouldn't hold out hope if you're still hoping for the decks to become feasible to play in tandem. Since there's still so much anti-synergy, it's not even funny. Beyond that, I don't really think Drytron needed the extender or the search that badly, or that either of those things will fix Ursarctic. Good thing they got a skill drain though, right guys? Isn't that based? Sleipnir the Runic main is a level 9 that can temporarily banish itself and an opponent's monster during your main phase or your opponent's battle phase, and if your opponent adds a card from deck to hand, summons a Runic token. This card adds a few options to Runic's arsenal. Now all their quick plays can represent temporary removal to help play through boards, as well as a level 9 if you're trying to make rank 9s or want a whole bunch of stars for synchro plays. You're not gonna believe me when I tell you what they use the token for. In the OCG, this card was used in combination with Tyrant's Tirade, a card that stops the activation of monster effects on field and in hand, but requires you to tribute 2 monsters to activate it. With their newfound ability to summon 2 monsters off a single quick play spell, Runick was able to use this card not only as a very potent skill drain, but also to stop the very many hand traps that disrupt Fountain. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is this just jank that I shouldn't actually concern myself with, or is Runick the very first deck to ever summon 2 monsters and I never noticed before? What is going on? Fusion Armament reveals a fusion from extra deck and summons one of its materials from extra deck or graveyard with its effects negated. Beyond its utility as a janky ready fusion, there's not really many good targets to summon, especially since the summon isn't treated as a fusion summon. You've got your standard warrior and dragon targets if you somehow run out of extenders for those types. Naturia Beast and Barkion are both targets through Exterio, so there's a little bit of natural synergy with Naturia if you just need a body or some stars. You can reveal Illusion Chimera to summon the OG Chimera, but one of the best parts of the Chimera engine is the Phantom Beast King Chimera, so skipping that step seems counterproductive. The most interesting one is probably Fusionist, a fusion material for rare fish, since both of them are also targets for instant and ready fusion. Drawing any combination of armament, ready, and instant can put 2 bodies on board without having to play redundant targets in the extra deck. I got no idea what deck you're playing that wants a level 3 beast and a level 4 fish though. Maybe we're gonna ask that guy over there. Click and Echo is a level 2 Sea Serpent that can't be used as Fusion, Sync, or Xyz material, and if it's linked off, summons to the opposite field and forces that player to keep their hand revealed. Not extremely strong on the surface, but this card has some applications that could give it a niche right now specifically, as long as Konami doesn't do the thing again. Against Kashtira, having the hand information to tell you exactly how broken your opponent opened and how much you have to play around can make navigating their turn much easier, and forcing them to control a monster can stop them from summoning Unicorn and Fenrir. Meanwhile, against Vanquish Soul, forcing them to reveal their hand makes them unable to reveal cards for the cost of their effects. If either of these decks manages to stick a second monster in the field and make a link 2, it'll pass back to you, but at the very least you'll have gotten full hand info and tunneled them onto a likely suboptimal opening play. The only question that remains is what deck could you summon some random level 2 in? Dark Corridor searches a Dark World monster, then discards a card. A rotor that also triggers all your cards is good, but being a hard once per turn kind of puts it in a weird position in Dark World decks. With Dark World focusing so heavily on deep drawing and looping all their cards, it'd be awkward to play 3 copies of a card you never want to draw more than 1 of. Ripping a dead corridor off the top instead of another discard outlet can greatly slow down your game plan, or even stop you dead in your tracks. Playing it will introduce a lot more consistency to the deck, but it won't come without its challenges. Banishing Trap Hole activates when a monster with 1500 or less attack is summoned and banishes it face down. The Lobies have had it too good for too long, now they can be bottomless too! Wildheart still clears. This card gives Trap Tricks a strong response to matchups like Purrely, where all their monsters are too small for bottomless, or like Tier that don't care about Floodgate. But imagine, if you will, you Floodgate the Purrelys and bottomless the Tiers. It's a foolproof plan really. There will be matchups where this hole is the best, but for now just keep it in the back of your mind. Oops, I dropped my monster card that I use for my Magnum the Reliever. Magnum the Reliever is a fusion of a monster summoned from the extra deck and a monster in the hand that can put a poly or fusion spell from graveyard on the bottom of the deck to draw a card, and when a card or effect is activated, can banish a poly or fusion spell from graveyard to pop a card on the field. Neat generic fusion that has some of the same benefits as Guardian Chimera with a little more flexibility. Getting the draw on your own turn makes it easier to make use of, and the pop being a quick effect instead of a trigger effect makes it easier to time properly in the case of things like removing floodgates before they resolve. It's a good option for fusion-centric decks like Brandon and Chimera. Tokusano Shinkyojin can send monsters from your hand or field whose levels equal 10 to draw 2. Congratulations, Trains, Time Lords, Nemlyria, Yubil, Earthbound Immortals, Eldritch, Fluanderies, Egyptian Gods, Sacred Beasts, Malefics, Yosenju, the Wicked Gods, Rainbow Dragon, Assault Mode, and Water Dragon Cluster. You have trade-in now.
ALBAZ lore update.
Where'd everybody go? Finally, your Finish is a trap monster you can summon if 10 or more cards have been activated this turn, and if your opponent activates a card or effect after that, you can destroy all cards your opponent controls, then set her back to the spell and trap zones. If you look like this, DM me.